Everyone wants to take their business, their skills, to the next level. Small and mid-sized business owners have exceptional insight into how to do this. They endure and thrive because they find ways to overcome the challenges that come their way, and they can teach us valuable lessons to apply to our own companies and lives. Stephen Nooner, founder and owner of Alkali, a company with a unique process that helps businesses more effectively buy and manage their insurance programs. And Bob Gibbons, builder of Riata Commercial Realty, a real estate advisor and tenant advocate, are two prominent Metroplex businessmen who, along with their weekly guests, will ask their and your probing questions, finding impactful solutions that will help you reach for the next level. Here are your hosts, Stephen Nooner and Bob Gibbons.
Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. This is your host, Bob Gibbons.
And I'm Stephen Nooner.
Thanks for being with us today. We're excited. We got a great guest. Stephen, who we got today?
We have a local celebrity with us today.
Ooh.
We don't just have a next leveler. We have a local celebrity, maybe beyond local. I've been in Dallas too long, so I'm not sure.
Is Dale Hansen here?
My new friend, Jeff Crilley, CEO of Real News PR, is here. Real News PR helps small and mid-sized companies tell their story. We're going to learn more about that. They have 14 employees here in Dallas. And if you want to learn more about Jeff or Real News PR, please visit realnewspr.com. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Glad you're here with us. So we always like to start off with what we call wisdom from others, which is a quote, a pithy quote, hopefully, that we can discuss at length. Actually, no, just at a moment's notice. And today our wisdom from others is coming from Buckminster Fuller. And he said, "Don't fight forces, use them." And this was, Stephen, this was your brainchild. So why are we quoting him?
Well, when I met Jeff recently, and I'm going to ask him to share how his business got started, I thought it was interesting how he started his company, and he was fighting forces, and then he ultimately sort of used them, and here we are. And so I thought that was really inspirational. For me, it's been the whole Affordable Care Act. We, as an industry, I watched everybody fight it, and we embraced it. I was too young to retire, so we entrenched, and we used the forces and developed some capabilities, and now we've been, as Trump would say, winning a lot these days. So,
well, yeah, but Charlie Sheen said that too.
It's huge. It's huge.
It's huge, yeah.
Obamacare's a disaster.
It is. I'm not saying that part's not true.
But we also like,
Very
Jeff,
good,
we like to talk to people a little bit about things something about yourself that's a little unusual that not everybody knows, that's sort of like an inside scoop. So what is it about you that's a little unusual, a little different?
Is this Barbara Walters, if you could be a tree?
If you could be a tree.
What kind of tree would I be?
Would you be a willow?
Yeah.
What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Okay, what would people want to know about me? I wake up out of bed happy. I love what I do. I pinch myself that I get to work every day with wonderful employees, including my daughter. And I found out that I passed the entrepreneurial gene onto my daughter because she just got back from vacation, 3-4 days of vacation, and she was obsessed with the company and checking in, and she never completely unplugged, which is a lot like me. My wife has pictures of me on the beach, like a nice beach scene, on the laptop with a cell phone, and she'll tweet it out, "My husband relaxing on vacation."
I'm not sure that's the gene to pass on, man.
But if you do what you love, it's not work. Right?
Yeah,
That's cool.
that's true.
I like that.
Well, let's tell us a little bit about Real PR, and kind of specifically, you guys talk a lot about sharing your story. So what does that mean to the audience?
So I think every business has to tell their story, and some businesses are better than other businesses. Some businesses, you've heard the name, but you're not sure what they do. So I'm passionate about everybody constantly needs to be telling and retelling their story through different formats. So my history is I came up through TV news, Lansing, Michigan, Omaha, Nebraska, Minneapolis, and then 15 years in Dallas. And so I got to do everything from corny dogs at the state fair to presidential elections. Dallas, and I'm cruising along. I'd had dreams of going to New York and being the main anchor one day, and then I started having kids, and I moved to Texas and said, let me just be the king of a local market. But then I think all of us were climbing a hill, and we get to the top of the hill, and we look around and we say, is this all there is? So I climbed to the top of the little hill I was climbing called local TV news, because I was a street reporter at Channel 4 for 15 years, and they weren't going to make me Clarice Tinsley, so I had
Now I've got a mental picture I just didn't want.
I had nowhere to go. So I kind of looked around and I said, you know what, I'm 45, do I have a second act? And I'd written a book in 2002 called Free Publicity. A TV reporter shares the secrets for getting covered on the news. I had run around for 6 years like a crazy man giving speeches, sometimes 2 a day. I sold a total of 70,000 copies of the book. Wow. I created a really good brand for myself in Dallas as not only the news guy, but the PR guy. And at the ripe old age of 45, I got permission from my wife to quit. And I quit in May of 2008. And 1 month later, the housing bubble bursts and we go into the Great Recession, which could have been disastrous for most businesses. But because I had literally 70,000 books on the street that anointed me the expert in public relations, the guy who literally wrote the book on PR, is now available for hire.
And one of the things, I mean, if I recall, and you can set the record straight, is that there was, it wasn't necessarily encouraged, or they weren't necessarily excited. You weren't able to charge speaker fees, or I mean, so you were actually, when I was talking about the forces, there was a little bit of resistance to you going out and doing that, right?
So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. When I wrote the book, I never intended to leave TV news, and my bosses accidentally did me a favor. They said, you're not allowed to accept speakers' fees. And when I was writing the book, I was cashing little checks. I not big checks. I was cashing little checks in my mind. I thought, certainly I could get $500 to give a speech or something like that. So instead of sitting there on the couch waiting for the phone to ring for somebody to pay me $500 to speak, I had to learn how to hustle. I had to get myself booked solid, because if I was going to make any money selling a $10 book, I had to make it up in volume. So I would call up Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs and chambers of commerces and women's groups, and I would say, hey, my name is Jeff Crilley. I'm a TV guy, but I'm also running around giving free speeches on something that might interest your members. It's called Marketing Without Money. And the title is so, I mean, who doesn't want that, right? So they're like, oh yeah, let's bring the TV guy in. And I learned how to speak. TV news didn't teach you how to do a good presentation, but I had to learn through trial and error how to give a good speech, and I got really, really good at it. And pretty soon I'm selling books by the case. Companies would say, hey, can you travel? We'd like you to be our keynote next year. What's your speaker's fee? And I'd say, well, I have a relationship with my company. I cannot take a speaker's fee. I can only sell books. How many people are going to be in the audience? And they'd say 400. I'm like, well, I charge $10 a book. What if we just sold you 4 cases of 100, and you guys will look very generous. The association that brought me in has provided free books for everybody, and then that way I won't
win-win.
Yeah, I won't
That's
be
cool.
dishonoring the agreement I had with my bosses. I never took a speaker's fee. I just sold books.
Okay, so you left the studio, the radio station you were with, or the TV station you were with. How do you go from being branded as the free publicity guy to making money from being the free publicity guy?
So PR firms in Dallas, and this goes on across the country, you hire them. Most of them work on retainer. The retainers can be as low as $2,000 a month all the way up to, say, $25,000 a month for the big firms to get you news coverage. And for all those years, I was getting calls from PR people who really didn't know what they were doing. They were nice people. They just didn't watch the news, never worked in a newsroom. They
had a college degree in it.
Yeah, yeah. They had a college degree. They learned from a professor who never worked in news. There was no one in the process who could tell the emperor he had no clothes. So if the client came up with a bad idea, nobody in the mix would know it was a bad idea. And pretty soon they're putting a young lady named Amber on the phone with a journalist like me saying, Mr. Crilley, are you the guy who's on camera, or are you behind the scenes? And that was, I swear to God, that was...
My daughter's named Amber.
Amber?
No, I'm kidding. That's Meredith.
So, yeah, is it Meredith? Yes. So I would get these calls, and they were well-meaning people, but they didn't Google me. They were stubbing their toe. They were getting off on the wrong foot with journalists, and I finally decided, I was like, you know what? I know more about this PR stuff than 99% of the people who are pitching me news stories.
Right.
Why don't I just take a bet on myself? I'm pretty good at the entrepreneur thing. You know, I was selling an average of 11,000 books a year for 6 straight years. I knew I wasn't going to starve.
Sure.
Even if I was just going to speak and sell books, I could make 6 figures. But then I said, if I put on back of the speaker thing a PR firm that could do the services. You know, the book is called Free Publicity, so I'm teaching you, it's a how-to book. Here's how to do it yourself.
Yeah.
But I know that there's a certain number of people who are busy running a business. They don't have time to call journalists and pitch their story, and so somebody needs to do that, and that's what my firm does.
And if I recall, you were telling me too that like people that were out, that did have the time, were going out and executing some of the stuff in the book, and they were getting the results. So you also knew you had a proven formula.
Yes. So like people would, I'd be signing their book at a Rotary speech, and they'd be mad at their PR firm. They'd say, "Hey, Jeff Crilley, you know, I spent X."
Sick of Amber.
Exactly. Not to beat up on Amber. If you're listening, Amber, we love you. We know you know that. So they'd be mad at their PR firm. They'd say, "You know, I spent X amount last year with this PR firm, and they got me one measly article in the Dallas Business Journal, and I could have gotten that myself, or I could have taken out, you know, several full-page ads for what I paid that PR firm. Could I hire you, Jeff Crilley?" And I'd say, "No, I'm on the news. I can't take your money, but I'll tell you what to do for free. It's easy for me. What do you want to promote?" And then they would tell me what they wanted to promote. I was like, "Oh, that's easy. If you read the Dallas Morning News, you probably have read the name Steve Blow. He loves stories like yours. Why don't you call up Steve Blow, tell him this, this, and this, and you'll get in the paper." And then 2 weeks later, they'd call me up and they'd say, "Crilley, you are a genius. If you get the Sunday Dallas Morning News, go out to your driveway, pick it up, and see whose face you see on the front page. It's me. It worked. Steve Blow did the article. You're a genius." And then I would go out to my driveway, and I'd see this front page article by Steve Blow, who's a great writer who finally retired. He retired. And I love Steve. I mean, Dallas Morning News really lost a valuable person there. But as I'm reading this article from Steve Blow, I'm thinking to myself, I made that happen. I didn't make the phone call, but I told them exactly what to say, who to call, what their angle was. I'm pretty good at this PR stuff. And news is like a MASH unit. You come in, you're scrambled from one story to another story. I remember days when I had 4 different stories. The story would fall apart, and they'd say, "Okay, now we need you to move to Arlington. There's a city council meeting." And before I got to Arlington, they're like, "Okay, we've had a triple shooting in Frisco. Move to Frisco." So you're running.
Right.
And I recognized from being around PR firms that they were slow. You know, if we're a MASH unit, PR firms are like concierge medicine. One surgery a week after I've had my morning.
Can't overwhelm the client. Come on, Jeff.
So I'm like, you know what? If I took the news mentality of let's get her done, let's kick in that door, we can't lose because the rest of the world moves too slowly. So there are clients that will come into our office and they'll be explaining what they need publicity for. And it's so easy for us because we know all the journalists in town that I'll say, "Hold on for 1 second. I'll step out of the room. I'll call a journalist that I know. I'll come back into the room. I'll hand the phone to him and say, 'Hey, this is Jane Doe with the Dallas Business Journal. She loves your story. Why don't you tell her what your story is about?'" And then the client is telling the story, and they hang up and they're saying, "Wow, where did you come from?" So it's not like we had to have a bunch of meetings. It's like, you've got a story. I know the journalist. Let's get you two together.
That's powerful. Well, we're going to go to a break, but before we do, when we come back, easy ways to rake in a fortune from the free publicity guy himself without spending a dime.
And now, Confessions of a Recovering Landlord.
This is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty, and I am your recovering landlord. After 20 years as a landlord, I now use that experience only for the benefit of companies that lease or buy office buildings and warehouses. Today's confession: knowledge is power. We all negotiate from a position of power and strength, or at least we want to. In any negotiation, the party with the most knowledge probably has the upper hand, and landlords count on this. being the case whenever you're negotiating a lease, because most landlords are professional real estate investors and they hire professional leasing agents and property managers. Landlords are in the market every day negotiating leases, while tenants probably only negotiate 1, maybe 2 leases every few years. So tenants feel outgunned. Don't let landlords have all the power. As a former landlord for 20 years, I understand how landlords think and what motivates them. So let me put that knowledge and experience to work on your side of the negotiation. To learn more, contact me at texastenantrep.com. Again, that's texastenantrep.com.
Have you started making plans to take your business to the next level in 2016? Hi, I'm Stephen Nooner, founder and CEO of Alkali. We have a trademark process called the Empowered Advantage that enables CEOs, business owners, and entrepreneurs to more effectively buy and manage their insurance. Before sitting down to make your plans for the new year, here are just a few things to consider. Would you say that you have an actual insurance strategy, one that you can articulate, or have you just purchased a policy here and there over the years? If you have an insurance strategy, was it discussed under the pressure of a renewal deadline or considered earlier in the year to avoid fire drill decision making? If your answer was no to either of these questions, then you may not have the right partner on your team. Visit alkaliservices.com to contact us and take the next step to a bigger and better future.
Hi, I'm Kristen Robertson, president of Brio Leadership, and I've just been interviewed by Steve and Bob, and boy, do they need to talk about corporate culture.
Welcome back to The Next Level, Conversations That Propel Business. We're here with our guest, Jeff Crilley. He's the CEO and founder of Real News PR, and you can find out more about that firm at realnewspr.com.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, I love the story. You're sharing your story, Jeff.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I think it's really insightful. But one of the things I also think is interesting is how you guys have evolved as a business. So, I mean, it's very, we've talked a lot about PR, but the whole industry with technology and everything's changing, and I think it's really interesting how you guys have evolved to do that. So why don't you share that journey with us a little bit?
So I think my father raised me to be a pleaser, and that is kind of a blessing and a curse. I think for the most part a blessing, because when I engage with a client, I am bending over backwards to make them happy. And sometimes at my own peril, I end up making bad business decisions to make a client happy sometimes, but for the most part, it's worked out happily. So in year one, I was getting people on the news, and we do month-to-month agreements. So I like that. It keeps me very accountable. I'm always 30 days away from getting fired. So I would have 10 clients, and I'd build it up to 14 or 15. I'd lose 4 or 5. I'd build it up to 14 or 15, lose 4 or 5. There was a commonality. They were saying, Jeff, you're a great guy. You did everything we paid you to do. Get us in the news, get us on TV, get us on the radio.
Right.
It just didn't make the phone blow up. It didn't lead to 100 orders, and so we're going to have to part friends. And I recognized in year one there's a flaw in my business model, that news does some things very well. It doesn't do everything well. What it does very well is credibility. News is 7 times more believable than advertising. Wow. But, the Dallas Morning News could interview you guys and put you on the front page, and it doesn't mean your server
you already have that
crashes
set
the
up?
next day. Good, hold on. I'll get Cheryl Hall.
Go step out in the hallway and make this sucker happen.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't lead to 1 million orders all the time. And so I said, okay, we need to start adding services to increase the ROI. So the service we added first was videography. I just believe we're in a YouTube generation. If somebody comes to your website and they see a bunch of text and they see a video, you're always going to watch the movie instead of read the book. So I came up through news. For 25 years, I'm a storyteller, a video storyteller. Let's just hire a videographer and start telling people stories. And then I'd tell them, make sure we get this out through social media. And they'd say, well, I'm not really doing much with social media. And this is 2010. And I'm like, Facebook's not a fad. It's not a flash in the pan. You gotta have social media. So we hired a social media person, and pretty soon we hired a speakers bureau. So we get our clients booked to speak in front of Rotaries and Kiwanis clubs, as I did. We make their website. We optimize their website, so if somebody Googles, they're going to find you on page 1 if we're optimizing for the right terms. We just added a Hispanic division. We've got a podcast division, and now I'm even considering baby stepping into advertising. But I'm always kind of inventing and reinventing. Why? because one of my favorite quotes, if I can add a quote, is Wayne Gretzky was asked one time, "Why are you such a great hockey player?" And he said, "It's simple. Everybody else is skating to the puck. I'm skating to where the puck is going to be." Mm-hmm. I think the areas that I'm getting into is where the puck is going to be. The reason Blockbuster is no longer around is it didn't anticipate Netflix. Nope. When they had so much money, they could have bought Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Kodak was late to the game recognizing the digital camera. So what I see,
had a hold of it.
right?
Well, they actually invented it.
It's their technology.
Yeah, it was their technology. They just didn't know what to do with it.
So what I see happening is the traditional media, print, radio, and television, is on the decline. They're not dead, but not nearly as many people are reading the Dallas Morning News as read it a generation ago.
Sure.
And you're seeing the rise of the person who's becoming their own broadcaster through YouTube. My younger brother, his name is Mark Crilley. He's the illustrator of my book. He has 500,000 people subscribing to his YouTube channel.
Wow.
I know for a fact that Channel 4's broadcast, their 9 o'clock news, their premier broadcast, reaches 200,000 people. So my younger brother in Southfield, Michigan, is reaching more people than watch the 9 o'clock news on Channel 4, the #1 rated 9 o'clock newscast in Dallas. So I'm into content creation. Let's become the media, or allow our clients to become their own content provider, because that's where everything's going.
So with the kinds of companies you're working with, do you find a major difference in what you do for them when it's business to business versus business to consumer, or do you only work with one of the two?
No, we tailor our strategy to the client. So client says, I don't really care about the consumer, I'm just B2B. So I instantly start thinking, okay, so if you're just B2B, what are the industry magazines that would be most valuable to you? Because industry magazines act a lot like the mainstream media. Somebody has to write those articles. Right. Somebody has to, sell advertising. They're often easier to get into than the mainstream media because they're so short-staffed. In fact, we just hired a content writer so we can write an article as the client, have the client sign off on it, put their byline in there, and then offer it to industry magazines as an article, that could help their readers. If it's not written too much like a commercial, they'll publish it word for word.
Do you find you have more success with one or the other, or one has a longer tolerance?
That's a good
higher
question.
ROI?
I think
your
it,
ideal?
I like small to mid-sized businesses because I need direct access to the decision maker. Mm-hmm. We've worked for very large companies, but I find that very large companies move too slowly, and news moves very, very quickly. So in my book, there's a chapter called The Feeding Frenzy, and that essentially says if you sell the media what the media is buying right when they're buying it, you'll have a lot of success. I can't tell you how many times in my news career a PR person would call me one day too late. And I'd say, Amber, why didn't
poor girl? She's not going to have a job after this interview.
Hold on, we got Amber on line 2. Yes, go ahead, Amber. So she would call me and she would pitch me this story, and I'd say, Amber, where were you yesterday? I spent 4 hours on the phone trying to find a client like the one you represent. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you call me yesterday? So one of the things we pride ourselves on is moving at the speed of news, getting clients on the news while the media still cares about their story. Yeah. And so these windows of opportunity open and they close.
Sure.
And the secret is like a wave. You're trying to catch the crest of the wave, and it can propel you down.
Get your 15 minutes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So once you have a client in one industry, can you have another client in that same industry in the same area?
I can, as long as we can clearly see success. I put something in my contract that is still kind of ridiculous. It's a money back guarantee. It's so vaguely written that I had a labor attorney sign it one time, and she says, "I'm gleefully signing this contract, Jeff, but as a labor attorney who reviews contracts for a living, I insist you get rid of that line. That if you're not completely satisfied, I'll give you your money back, because it's too vague. It means you could get me on the Today Show or the Good Morning America, and I could say, I'm not satisfied, I'm not on 60 Minutes. And I thought about it and prayed about it, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to take it out. I think it makes people comfortable.
Sure.
And it takes all the risk away. And I've only had it exercised 5 times in 8 years of business. And each time I said, God bless them. I think they needed the money more than I did.
Yeah.
And so that's a long answer to your question.
Yeah.
Can you work with people in the same space? I can if there's enough media opportunities. So let's suppose you're a criminal defense attorney. There's a criminal defense story coming along every single day. So, yeah, I could have 2 criminal defense attorneys and keep them both immensely happy. But if it's a narrow niche where this story only comes around once every 3 months anyway, I would be reluctant to take somebody else because, again, I'm a pleaser. I never want that weight of disappointment. Like, Crilley, you failed me in some way. So I'm a big client experience guy, and what I preach to my team every day is we're a customer experience company that happens to create videos. We're a customer experience company that happens to get you on the news.
We tell that to our team all the time at Alkali. Switching gears a little bit, just because we teased it and we're going to run out of time, it's been really great. So for people who aren't ready for you yet, obviously there's the book, but what's some free publicity tips where can someone in their home right now that's got an idea and getting things started, where can they start?
Okay, so the easiest answer to that is and you don't even need the book to do this. It's just paying attention to the news.
But as long as you're looking at the book, talking about the book, where do they get the book? By the way,
they could go on Amazon and buy it, or if they
free publicity,
or send me an email, Jeff Crilley at realnewspr.com, and I'll send you a free book.
Crilley.
Yeah. I'll send you a free book. I give the book away these days. I don't sell it anymore.
Okay.
But short answer is, if you're driving in the car and they're talking about a story that you're an expert in, there's the window of opportunity has just opened for you. Most of the time when you hear a news story, the broadcaster has missed the point, or they haven't covered all the angles. And if you ever find yourself, looking at the radio station in your car or cursing your TV set, saying they're missing the point. They haven't. This is what I talk about. That you should call. It's that simple. You call the radio station, you call the TV station where you just heard the story and say, hey, you guys just ran a story on Obamacare, and I think you're missing the point. Can I talk to the reporter who's covering that story? They're going to patch you into a reporter, and then this is your audition. You're saying, hey, Michelle, loved your story just now, but I'm in this business, and I consult with small to mid-sized businesses all the time.
Right.
And I can tell you, as a guy on the front line, A, B, and C. If you're doing a follow-up, or you're considering doing a follow-up, or the next time you do an Obamacare story, don't
assume that just because the story's already hit, that it's not going to be hit again a few more times.
Sometimes there's more energy there, or they're doing one angle for the 5, and then there's another angle that they need to do for the 10 o'clock news. So you could catch them in a good cycle. Or at the very worst, you made a contact, and news reporters are told, be nice to people. You are the ambassador for the station. Yes.
I don't know. I was on national news by accident in '97, and not a one of them was nice to me. Really?
We'll talk about that problem on another show.
Exactly.
You weren't indicted of that, were you? I think you were cleared.
Fully exonerated.
Okay, good. That's what I thought.
You heard it here.
All right, so what's the cycle? I mean, you mentioned the cycle real quick. How much time before a broadcast is too late?
I think you can. Every story is different. Some stories have a long shelf life. Some stories have a very short shelf life. So I think as soon as you hear a story that you talk about, you need to call immediately and try to get a hold of the person who just told the story. I know we don't have any time left, but I've had clients before. I'm driving in the car. I'm listening to their story. I'm calling up my client. I'm saying, hey, if you have time, I think I can get you on KRLD or WBAP. And am I allowed to even mention those stations here? I'm not sure.
Fine with me. Nobody else we can.
And so I'll call the news station. I'll tell them what my story is, and the next thing you know, my client's on the air.
Well, Jeff, really appreciate your time sharing your wisdom today. If you'd like to learn more about Jeff, visit realnewspr.com. If you want to connect with us and the show, The website is nextlevelshow.com.
Especially reporters.
Yes. You can find previous guests. If you heard something that you wanted to share this story with someone else that you think could use it or be inspired by it, please like us on Facebook and spread the word.
See you next week.
Have a good week.
You have been listening to The Next Level, Conversations That Propel Business with Stephen Nooner and Bob Gibbons. Join us every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. for more prolific conversations that will take your business to the next level.